Hello and welcome to a video from
Absolute Game Of.
Nerd! All right, so as I've been talking about before, I wanted to start, as much as I love comic books, I love A Song of Ice and Fire. You know, if you don't know what that is from, that's from the Game of Thrones show. It's what the book series is called. They have a show, House of the Dragon. Season 2's coming out, and I said I was going to do a weekly kind of review episode. And so talking with Mike, who you may not recognize here because he's very cleanly shaven. So Mike is going to be joining me. Mike, say hi. How you doing?
Hey, Rohan. Good to see you guys. Yes, very unstark-like for me to cut my beard off. But yeah, there's a rare time people will ever catch me on the internet sans beard.
As I say, Mike, winter is coming and you need that beard.
That's it.
Yeah, so anyways, like I was saying, we're going to do a weekly, Mike's going to join me as much as he can, but we're going to do a weekly kind of review of each episode. So obviously the show starts this coming Sunday. So this is kind of our preview discussion on what's going on. So to start, let's kind of just, Mike, really quick, kind of go over where kind of each of us stand with the kind of IP in general. So as I've shared before, I'm a nut when it comes to this stuff. I've read every book 3 or 4 times. I've even listened to them a couple times. I listen to podcasts. I've read all associated readings, whether that be Dunk and Egg, Fire and Blood, the World book, all of that stuff. Anything that comes out, I'm reading because I am absolutely obsessed with this world and this universe. Where do you stand?
Almost exactly the same. I've read every single one of it's my favorite book series of all time. I think we've talked about this. I've read it. Me and Rohan started talking about comic books before we knew this about each other. Yeah. I mean, I'm a diehard fan. I've met George R. Martin several times. I have all the books signed. I've read everything he's done. Not just Song of Fire and Ice. I've also read other stuff he's done, like Fever Dream and stuff. I just like everything that he's done. So I was really happy to meet a kindred soul in Rohan here. And, for a long time, I had some friends who were into the series, but weren't quite as into it as me. So it's really hard when you've read the book so many times and you've read the appendices front to back 1,000 times to really get into all the theorizing and all the deep cuts and all the, So to have a show like this come out, and have a friend who, you talk to a lot about, not just this, but other pop culture things. It's a dream come true, man. We're living in a golden age of television, and I'm pretty excited to share with you every week.
Yes, exactly. So real quick, let's start with high level. What did you think of season 1?
I mean, in short, it was fantastic. I mean, I think it was clearly better than Game of Thrones. I mean, again, being a snob of the books, I had my judgments about the show, of course. And of course, I had some growing pains in the beginning. Those guys didn't really know how to run a show, and they didn't know how to end the show either. Whatever, we won't get into all that. But I love that show because I love the IP. Fine. So I didn't have the highest hopes for this show, and I was stunned by how good it was. It was the best TV show on TV last year, let alone what I watched. It was unbelievable. It's sharp. Yes, we can nitpick some certain things, of course, but in general, blew my mind, and I'm really excited for the second season.
I 100% agree. I think with Game of Thrones, the TV show definitely had some great moments, and they did a lot of good stuff. But especially first off, the last season was such a train wreck. I always say, as much as I love that IP, you think I would have watched that series multiple times over, but because of how they ended it, it's like I have no desire. And so obviously going into House of Dragon season 2, I was like, I'm excited this is coming out, but is it going to be more of what we saw at the end there? And thankfully, like you said, it was not. It is absolutely a higher quality, better television show than the entire, any season you could pick out of Game of Thrones. And what's funny is, I don't know, did you see George R. Martin came out last week and was talking about, he's like, I don't know why when people want to adapt a book or something for a show or a movie, they always feel this need to change things to make it their own. And then he said, and 99.9% of the time, it's not better. No. And I felt like that was a direct,
of course it was.
Yeah, at the, what is it? What were the showrunners called for Game of Thrones?
D&D,
yeah.
Andy Austin Weiss. Yeah, I mean, and it really, you hit it on the head. Sometimes you make an adaptation because it doesn't translate well to a TV or a movie. We all know this, right? You have to streamline things, shorten things. Game of Thrones, especially, A Song of Ice and Fire, has so many characters. Sure, it won't make sense if you threw them all at casual viewers who have not read the books. But when you add things just for the sake of adding them, it's not only is that dumb, period, but the bigger problem is, when the books are already that revered. It's already written for you. You have the easiest job in the world. You have the easiest job. Like, what should we do for dialogue for the scene? How about we open the book and write the dialogue down? Like, that's what killed me about that. And that's why, the best parts of Game of Thrones were the ones that were pulled directly from the books. No doubt about it. And as soon as they started getting away from the books and started adding things, and I mean, you could tell, like, you guys are not George R.R. Martin. I'm sorry. You're not that good of a writer. The seams are very obvious. If the whole thing was like that, I think people would have been more forgiving. But when you have incredible moments like you have, for the Red Wedding, we all knew was coming, these really richly detailed characters written well with dialogue right out of the books, and then you just throw that all away and rush through the last couple seasons, it makes it more obvious. And that's exactly what we ended up with. And again, I know they didn't have stuff to adapt at the end, but the guy's right there. George, just ask him,
Yeah. And I mean, you can just tell too, like when they first started, they were into it. The showrunners were into it, and they were going to like take their time. And then like, it was clearly like, okay, we've been doing this for X amount of years. We've got other projects. Let's just wind this. And like a perfect example of this is like season 2, almost the entire season, you have Arya traveling from King's Landing, trying to get to the wall. Right. Meanwhile, you get to like season 6, 7, 8. They're literally going across the map.
They're teleporting
within an episode and back. And it's just like, okay, like there's clearly like we've decided there's an end out. We got to get out of here and let
exactly. And but to the one thing I will say though is those shows were harder to adapt because a lot of this stuff was written out. So you were stuck with, hey, we have all this content that we need to adapt, and now we don't have it. You have nothing to even like expand upon. It's going to be condensed just because you don't have it. Whereas conversely, House of the Dragon, it's only shade. Like you basically have an outline. You have a Cliff Notes version of what happened. They have room to stretch it out, but they basically say like, we know what the chapters are. We know what happens. We can fill in the dialogue in between. And they just got good writers to do that. I think that's the game plan, and they probably learned that from Game of Thrones. Honestly, they learned the lessons, and they know how to adapt it now. So hit the milestones, fill in the blanks with good writers.
And I actually wonder, like, because HBO decided like this is D&D's show, let's let them just finish it out how they want. In hindsight, I have to imagine, because it's the most popular television show of all time, they're like, let them go. We'll bring in people to keep this thing going. Right. And like now we're seeing the fruits of that. Like let's do this thing the right way. And like season 1,
you got the right people, right?
Phenomenal. Right. Like every episode I was hyped. I mean, I was into it. I mean, there were just so many. It's like the intensity of the episodes I loved. The actors were great. Like it was so good.
Yeah, there's not a bad actor in the show. I mean, and a lot of shows you're like, oh, that person's a really good actor, but there were several people I've never seen before, like in other movies and stuff, and I'm just like, where did they get these people? Like, that's unbelievable. Just people that blew my mind. It's fun. It's fun when you don't have huge big names. Like you have, the one Matt Smith's the only really person I was really aware of, and even he. I mean, I would say he's one of the least amazing people. You know what I mean? Like I like these character actors they bring in. They cast it really well, and it makes a difference. They got people passionate about writing.
One of the saddest things is that like Patty Considine, who played why am I blanking on the king's name? Viserys. Frickin', I mean, would just light the screen on fire. Like that scene when he bursts in and he's like on a cane, like it's just so good.
And I didn't love him at first, because it wasn't what I pictured Viserys to be. When he's younger and he's like an able-bodied, I was like, oh, okay. And Patty, I've seen him in things, so I was like, oh, I didn't expect him to play this character. When he got cast. But man, halfway through, you're like, oh, wow, this guy is just absolutely just acting circles around everyone in the room. I mean, it was pretty awesome. Even like Rhys Ifans, that's another big name actor, obviously.
Yeah.
Plays Hightower. He's great. I mean, he's just an absolutely awesome actor, great character actor, but he kills that role. He absolutely does, and it's fun to see these people really digging their teeth into something tasty for him.
And Rhys Ifans, talking about the comic books, played Lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man.
That's right.
Now, the one thing when we talk about departures from the book, there was one kind of fairly big change from the books, being that Alicent in the books, when Viserys dies, there was no moment where she heard him mumbling about who was to take over. The plot to put Aegon on the throne was 100% her and her family's plot. And When Viserys died, they even locked him down in that room for 3 days. Like they even talk about in the books how bad it smelled because they didn't want it to get out that the king had died. And so they wanted to get everything in place to crown Aegon. Now, the show has changed it in the sense that she had that moment with Viserys. And so now we almost have like 3 factions. You have, obviously, you have the Blacks. Then you have Alicent, who wants Aegon to be king, but doesn't really want to go to war.
Right.
And then you kind of have the other side that's on her side that is like, no, let's go to war for this. Like, curious, what are your thoughts on that change?
Well, this is a lot there. So I think there's a couple of reasons. One, that's just deliberately to have it's to connect it to the Game of Thrones series. You know, part of it, the whole thing with the knife that they use it. Like, there's a connection there in that. That's why the whole ice and fire thing, like you needed some connection to the, you don't have to have it, but they made that choice. That almost seems like sort of corporate meddling to me, but they attach it. And that's why him saying that he's hallucinating the reason why in the future something's going to happen. That was their connect. So that's maybe studio meddling. The other thing, and if you read this bad boy here, what I think is so clever is, again, it's a history book of what happened, and there's multiple factions and points of view in here. You get the court jesters of a different version than the romantic things that all the lords and ladies say. It gives you a lot of wiggle room of what happened. So I like the idea that actually they did it again. Laenor Velaryon in the original story, he dies.
Yes.
And everyone thinks he's dead in the show, but he's actually alive and sneaks away with his lover. So like, I like stuff like that because the book doesn't change, but it gives a little bit extra, like, ooh, that's interesting. I didn't see that coming. You know, not everyone who wrote the history book, the unreliable narrators, knew what happened. I kind of view it from that standpoint there, but I actually like what they're doing with, like, Alicent for exactly what you said, because they are still sympathetic characters. These families rip each other apart. Yes, some of them are evil sons of bees, but for the most part, it's a tragic story, right? This is your, typical, like, Shakespearean tragedy. These two families going against each other, ripping them apart, when the two main queens are actually friends. It just makes it more brutal. And I think that's why it's so important. It kind of doesn't make sense for Rhaenyra to just be like, yeah, no, forget it. I'm the queen now. Like, a part of me, when you just read the histories, like, where did that turn happen? I get that's what he said, but clearly it's in the best interest of the realm for you to not do this. I think you needed that moment of him doubling down on it, and that moment of doubt that she goes, I am going through with this. And I think that's what it did. I think it was a hard thing to take at face value. Like, why are they still fighting if they liked each other? I think you needed him to say that to her for that last push to get her. I think we'd all be saying the opposite. If it wasn't for that scene, I think we'd all be like, her motivation isn't quite strong enough.
Yeah, and just for a little context, for those that didn't read the books, when Mike says tying it to the knife, like, that's that Valyrian. So in the books, Valyrian swords are very few and far between. But as far as those daggers are concerned, there's still hundreds of those left. So the cat's paw dagger that was used to almost kill Bran was just a random Valyrian dagger. In the show, they've made it of high significance. It's also what Arya used to kill the Night King, et cetera, et cetera. That's all made up. That's not from the book. So just for anyone that was wondering anything about that.
Yeah, I gotta remember, this is like a super nerdy people. I'm assuming everyone knows what I'm talking about, but you're right. I should probably, for the lay people who are, ignore everything I just said. It's a little deep cut, but yeah.
Yeah, so obviously for all those also listening, like, we are not today going to get into any spoilers, because us being readers have read and kind of know where this story is going. We're going to talk about things that are only by in name. So we're not going to spoil anything. Now, when we do a weekly review, we're going to talk about what happened in the episodes. But for today's purposes, Mike, what are some high-level things you're kind of excited about for season 2?
Well, like I said, just like it's Game of Thrones, guys, right? There shouldn't be any surprise that bad things happen to good people or people in the gray area. There's no really strongly good and evil. That's what George R.R. Martin likes. And in real life, bad things happen to good people. You can expect more of the same. Don't get too attached to a lot of your favorite characters. And I don't think that's a spoiler. I think that's the nature of the story. What I think is interesting about this season is we don't know how many seasons they're going to go, right? They're either going to tell us in 3 or 4 seasons.
I know Martin has said that he envisions it being 4. So, but yeah, I don't think it's official.
Yeah, so that's where it's tough. You're not really sure where the stopping points are going to be. And there's only 8 episodes this season, correct? I believe. Yeah, so you can kind of guess as to where it's going to end. And so there's some pretty awesome moments. They've revealed 2 of the episode names. I think episodes 1 and 4. not only have they revealed the names, but if you read those names, if you are familiar with the material, you know what's going to happen in those. But not only that, the director of both of them, Alan Taylor, who was the director of some of the biggest and best episodes of A Game of Thrones. So I think we can expect, I'm expecting at least 2 absolutely bangers, and actually the first episode is one of them.
Wait, what's the name of is the first? What's I didn't actually notice they named the first one. What were the names?
Blood and Cheese is the first one. No, I'm sorry. It's A Son for a Son, which is spoilery.
Yeah,
and then the other one I think is A Dance of Dragons. Episode 4 or 5. Right. Okay. Which that's not that spoilery because there's dragons all over the place. But yeah, for those who know what's going on, yeah, there's a couple of good fights.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure everyone has heard Blood and Cheese, Blood and Cheese, Blood and Cheese. We're not going to talk about what Blood and Cheese is, but we will tell you, strap in for episode 1.
First episode, man.
I honestly cannot wait to see what this looks like on screen. I
don't want to. And that's the thing. And I know in the books, guys, there are certain things you get to when you've read the books. You're like, I don't know, man. It was bad enough when I read it.
Yeah. It is going to be something else. Now, the fourth episode called Dance of Dragons, like that could be a number of things. The main thing I think about is a bigger 1v1 that my guess isn't happening this season.
It won't be. That'll be, again, this is why I wonder what 3 or 4 is, because that's such a big moment. Probably 3. But then if they do it at 3, then you're kind of close to the end of the whole thing. So, so there's a whole bunch of dragon fights. Don't get me wrong here, but there's one big one that should be coming very soon.
Yeah, I would think let's just in Vegas. I think the Dance of Dragons. I'm gonna guess it's the when it's at Rook's Rest. You know what I'm talking about?
I think you're right. That's before the Battle of Tumbledon and all that. Yeah, and the Butcher's Ball and
yeah. So, any thoughts of where then? You have any thoughts about where do you think season 2 will end?
That's why I'm wondering how many seasons they're going to be. If they're going 4, I think it's pretty safe to say it's going to end Butcher's Ball type area around there. I think we'll get introduced to the Winter Wolves. We'll get some Starks this season.
Yeah, the Starks are in the trailers.
Right, exactly. So we're going to get all that, and I think if you time it around the battle we just talked about, I think that's where it ends, and I think it's pretty good because there's some big moments for some pretty big characters up to that point. And it should be some pretty good battles. But again, timing wise, is that big enough? Is that big enough? What I'm thinking, just end the season. I think so, but it really comes down to if they do a 3 or 4. If they're doing 3, it might even be beyond that. So
the one thing I think about is with episode 1, as we discussed, that's going to put it up here, right?
Yeah.
And then knowing that season 2 has got to be kind of like if it's 4 seasons, it's essentially the midpoint.
Right.
So is season 2 going to be a bit of a descent, or are they going to find a way to kind of find another climax?
And that's why I'm wondering what that finale is going to be.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not sure that big battle has enough implications for the main characters that we know. There's a lot of characters that are big, but not the main cast that aren't really involved. So that's why it's going to be interesting if they just end it there. I've actually been wondering what the season finale would be. I was hoping to see a name of it and give me an idea, but we don't know.
So let's as we kind of wind things down, let me ask Mike, are you team black or are you team green?
Oh, why would you ask me that? I feel like I had a stronger opinion last year than I do this year. Because it's a weird thing, because it's sort of, again, the blacks, I think, actually have a poor claim. And that's why they added that scene to give more of a motivation. I like Alicent. I feel bad for her. But the Greens are so reprehensible. Her sons are so terrible that I think I lean towards the blacks, especially the way season 1 ended. There's your motivation. If the whole thing they added with her hearing her father, his dying words, wasn't enough, that season finale seals it. So I would say I am team black.
Now, real quick, I want to ask. You said team black though has a poor claim. Is that just because of the historical precedence that has been set?
Yes, and the motivation of Rhaenyra's there too. I mean, I feel like, again, even though he named her whatever, again, it's not in the best interest of the realm. It has nothing to do with primogeniture, having females or males for me. But for me, it's what was in the best interest of the realm is not what they end up doing. And obviously it results in a horrible civil war that practically destroys the Targaryen dynasty. So clearly that was a bad decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't end well, and of course, and there's there's a chain reaction that leads to the a Song of Ice and Fire. Everything that happens there starts kind of back here. So, yeah, I guess it's more from like hindsight's 2020. That was a poor choice kind of thing. But in terms of the people, I like the blacks better. The blacks, I think, are better people, even if their claim isn't as good.
Yeah, I would kind of echo those exact sentiments. Like it's hard like it's hard to choose not Team Black, right? With the way things have laid out. That being said, like I think some of my favorite character is Aemon on Team
Oh, of
Green.
course.
Like he's awesome. I mean,
He's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the actor too. The actor was in The Last Kingdom, right? He's been in lots of things.
I actually don't recognize the actor at all.
Really?
Yeah.
The one you're talking Amo with the eye patch.
Right? Yeah.
He doesn't look anything the same. He's great. He's a great actor. I've seen him in other things. He's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah.
He did a great job. And I think he's a well-written character too. I like seeing him as a kid, and sort of how he gets, Vhagar and stuff. Like that was really well done, I feel like. And you see him getting kind of bullied and stuff. It leads to he makes sense. And then what I loved last season, the very last episode, when that goes down and his cousin, and they have that fight with the dragons. In the book, it makes it seem like it was intentional, but they've had a couple things like that. What just happened? He feels awful about it. I think that's actually important. And then he owns it. He chooses to own it. He says, "I did it on purpose because he wants to be a tough guy." I think that was so clever the way they did that. I thought it was awesome. Just adds a little level of pathos and doubt to him. You see him be a human for a second. You see him be a nice guy for a split second and realize what happened. But he's got to put on the hat, as soon as after that and be the bad. I loved that. I thought that was such a clever decision. I love those little things there. Yeah.
Like, especially like right after it happens, you see the look on his face.
Yes.
It's like, oh, that scene though, like talk about a scene that like they executed what was like, I just like, I love the shot of him, like the princely, like on his little dragon. And then you get that like shadow of Vhagar.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, split second. You wonder what's gonna happen. It's like this tension is so high. I don't think there was any music or anything, was there? It was just
no.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I knew it was gonna happen, but I was like, oh man, this is gonna be rough. So that was very, very well done.
Speaking of music, we can kind of finish this. I've heard that there's a new intro for season 2 versus like how they reuse the music from the Game of Thrones show.
Oh, good. I don't even like the beginning with the blood and stuff. I don't. There's nothing interesting about it to me. So yeah, I'd like to see it. Change it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we go into the week?
There's so many cool events. I mean, we're gonna get the twins, who we've already met. We should get the twins early.
I just love that they're Eric and Eric, like A and E. Like,
I know.
So good. It's just
we got more of the Cargill twins early in the season. Again, more Starks. We have some pretty awesome battles lined up. Again, I sound like such a snob, but like I'm excited for the performances. The actors they have in the show are nuts, and there's even better characters that are coming out. I can't wait to see the actors they cast to play them. Play some of these roles. It's going to be exciting. I think it's there's a lot of tasty roles, I think, for some actors we haven't seen before. You know what I mean? So I guess that's the cinephile in me. I want to see. They've got some awesome British actors, I'm sure, to knock these characters out of the park. So I'm looking to that.
Speaking of the actors, because they took the 2-year break between season 1 and season 2, when they showed on the trailer the scene with Jace, who's the eldest of Rhaenyra's kids, with Cregan Stark, dude is like way older now, and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But I hope we don't have a 2-year gap between every season.
I mean, I think it's too hard of a show. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if they do 3 full seasons and then the 4th season is 3 movies, hour and a half. They could probably wrap the whole thing up in a neat bow, and maybe they'll do them back to back or something like that. But yeah, that's the problem they're gonna run into, and that's why for a season, I mean, it spans how many years? It's weird to see some kids be recasted and then other actors not really change. Like Matt Smith. It's the same guy. He spanned like 30 or 40 years in the first season, whatever it was. I'm exaggerating, but yeah, I mean, it looks exactly the same. He has a couple gray streaks in his hair.
Yeah,
that's distracting as well, right? It kind of, you have to suspend your belief a little bit more. So, I'm excited for it. I mean, honestly, I'm trying not to watch any trailers or anything. I want to be surprised, but I'm getting better at this, especially with Marvel movies too.
Oh, you haven't watched the trailers yet?
I watched the first one. I didn't watch the latest one.
Okay.
Yeah, and I regretted watching the first one.
Oh yeah, I've enjoyed it. I get into the trailers and I watch all the like the videos that people put out of like the
Yeah,
I'm all about it.
I've been avoiding it entirely. This is it. This is the first moment I had to talk with somebody, which is great. But like I said, I'm trying to go in to be surprised every week. I already know too much. That's the problem, right?
Yeah. And that's why I don't feel so bad about the trailer thing. It's like I kind of know where this is gonna. And as we've talked about before, for those you may not remember it, but the end was revealed in the show already.
There you go.
So just put that out there.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Mike. We will we'll do this again next week after after episode 1 comes out. Again, Sunday, June 16th. I have been waiting for this night. So
I'm excited.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Do all the things, the like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But otherwise, Mike's info's in the bio. If you don't know Mike, that'll all be there. But otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Peace out.